that's a story that really hit me very hard. I've covered a lot of stories, massacres since, but that one was kind of personal to me because it was Australian. I never forget the look of him. Big shock of curly blonde hair and these piercing, staring eyes, like something out of a horror movie. It really was. Beautiful day. Look through the taxi window and almost framed perfectly is the first tower on fire. Big hole and it just been hit. I was overwhelmed by it. I was at the scene, found myself, boy from Bendigo, at the scene of certainly the biggest story of my career and perhaps my lifetime.
In part 2 of my chat with award-winning foreign correspondent Mike Amor, Mike told me more stories about his life on the road as a foreign correspondent. He gives us a fascinating insight into the tragic murder of young Aussie Chris Lane, who was in America for a scholarship playing baseball when he was tragically murdered by 3 young men. What it was like on the ground in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, and the devastation and horror of the Haiti earthquakes. What it was like in Guantanamo Bay terrorist prison where David Hicks was being held, and a whole lot more, including his thoughts on the COVID lockdown and the impact of the horrors that he has seen has had on him personally. Have a listen. Mike Amor, welcome back to part 2 of I Catch Killers.
Great to be here, Gary.
Well, I'm a little bit annoyed at you because of all the stories and adventures you've got. I think I made the wrong career decision as a foreign correspondent. But when you became the US foreign correspondent for Channel 7, it sounds like you were thrown in the deep end. If you're reporting on the September 11 and you went over there in 2000, you're right in the thick of it, right from the start.
Like everything I've done in life, I learned on the run for sure. And we were the only, my cameraman and I were the only crew in the US. And for a time, we were the only overseas crew for Channel 7. They closed their London bureau. So we were flat out. We were bouncing from story to story to story, from country to country to country. Exhausting, but amazing.
Well, I suppose you've got to jump in the deep end to see if you can swim, and you've certainly
I learned how to.
You kept your head above water, that's for sure. I remember Ashley Mullaney. You would have worked with her over in the US.
She's amazing.
She's great, and I remember when she was a young journalist, I think with the Telegraph, and I was speaking to her, and she just got a job in the for Channel 7 with Channel 7. Yeah. And she was asking me on advice about, I'm a bit nervous in front of cameras. You do a lot of interviews. How do you do this? And I'm thinking, you practice and giving advice. I was sort of a bit shocked that she was asking advice from me. I was still learning my way. But she was only there a relatively short time. Then I saw her pop up there, and now I see her strut the stage as if she was born into this. And I suppose
she's annoying. She's annoyingly natural at it.
Yes.
And that, for someone who has to work super, super bloody hard and make lots of mistakes and make a fool of themselves repeatedly, I hate people like that. I do love Ash, but...
she's a good lady. But, I had to laugh when she was I'm not sure if I'm making the right decision, whether I can do it. And I think it was about 12 months, 18 months later, and she's walking the world stage and looking very comfortable in what she's doing.
She's really good, and she's kicking goals. So
say good day to her if you're in contact with her, because I had fond memories of her when she was working the crime rounds in Sydney.
Will do.
The murder of Chris Lane. Do you want to tell the people that tell our listeners and viewers that don't know about it what the circumstances were in that crime, and then your involvement in it, because it was a deep dive that you had in that particular murder?
Yeah, so we got reports of an Australian who'd been killed in a very small town called Duncan, Oklahoma, just over 10 years ago. And, part of what we did was see Australians in terrible situations. So this was just another report, unfortunately, of an Australian, coming to grief in a tragic way in America. We reported it, gunned down while running, and not realizing how quickly the story would spin out of control. So Chris Lane was a young man from Melbourne who'd gone to Oklahoma on a baseball scholarship. Met a girl over there and fell in love. He'd only just returned to Melbourne, brought his girlfriend back here, Sarah, to be with the parents. Had just gone back to Oklahoma, getting ready for that year's baseball season, and was running off some jet lag in the afternoon. And 3 kids, literally kids, drove past and shot him in the back. They were aged 15, 16 and 17. They were arrested. And one of them told the police officers when asked why he did it, because they were bored. And that statement, that they did it because they were bored, quickly gathered not only Australian attention but international attention. Barack Obama spoke about it. So it was a story that really grabbed the attention of even a gun-weary country like America. And I initially, honestly, had underplayed it, so I didn't move very quickly on it. And I found myself kind of trying to play catch-up with other TV networks who'd gone to Oklahoma earlier than I did. I was there when they appeared in court. Michael Jones was 17-year-old. James Edward was 15-year-old. And there was the 16-year-old whose name escapes me for the moment.
Chancey Luna.
Chancey Luna.
Yeah.
Chancey Luna. And they're just like babies.
Yeah.
Just seeing them faces are like babies. So we covered the court case, and eventually they were sentenced. Chancey Luna was the gunman. He was 16, sentenced to life without parole, even though he was 16 at the time. He'll die in prison. Michael Jones was sentenced to life with parole. He'll be in his 50s when he gets out. And James Edwards has since been released. He served about 5 years. But in the aftermath of it, we decided to write a letter to all 3 of them while they were in jail. And lo and behold, Michael Jones, the 17-year-old, he was the driver, he responded and said he'd like to talk to us. So we agreed to sit down and do a prison interview. And we found ourselves in Holden, Oklahoma, to do this prison interview with Michael Jones. And all of a sudden, we were kind of engulfed in Chris Lane's story. The local police had been very reluctant to really cooperate with the media because any more than they had to, because they were embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
This horrific crime had happened in their community, and it was somebody from overseas. We sat down with Michael Jones in prison and spoke to him at length, asked him why he did it. He cried. I don't know if they were crocodile tears, begged forgiveness. And then we spoke to the local police force and said, well, we've got this interview with Michael Jones. We don't want it to be about Michael Jones solely. Will you finally talk to us? They opened up. They were terrific. Gave us all the evidence and vision that had never been seen before. So we started to piece together what turned out to be a documentary. Spoke to the witnesses on the ground, the people that tried to revive poor Chris. He fell to the side of the road. Basically, the bullet rattled around and in his lungs and killed him almost instantly. And these poor people were driving past and tried to save him. And then ultimately we spoke to Chancey Luna's parents, or mother and grandfather. And that led us to Peter and Donna, Chris's parents, who were very reluctant, understandably, to talk to us. Just terrific people, still absolutely traumatised by what had happened, the loss of their son. And they'd only just seen him off. In fact, Peter got a call from the area code from Duncan, Oklahoma, and thought it was Chris just checking in with him. It was his girlfriend's parents ringing to tell Peter that he'd been killed. and I think it was a very powerful piece of television. It kind of showed, I think, both sides of a tragedy. And I think you would have seen it too, Gary, that, yes, Peter and Donna and Chris's sisters suffered tremendous loss, but it's not black and white.
Yeah.
Also, Michael Jones's parents suffered tremendously. You can say they were bad parents. They seemed like loving people. The people who assisted Chris on the side of the road as he took his last breath, they're victims of all of this. The stupid antics of 3 drugged-up teenagers who had a weapon and thought it was fun to just shoot this poor kid that was out on an afternoon jog.
And it's interesting you're telling the story and get that appreciation of how many lives are destroyed. And I get that. When in homicide, when we're locking people up, and if it was a young offender, you know that you're destroying, his family's life as well, or her family life, whoever it might be. The ripple effect from senseless crimes like that. But and at that age, the stupidity of kids. Like, you look back, and I'm not saying we would do things like that, but some of the crazy things that you do that could result in consequences. And America, it just seems hard. They're my observation, and speaking to people who've spent time in American prisons, it just seems like a brutal system that they go in there and there's in there for life, or there's no rehabilitation that they're aiming for. It's just punishment. It's pure punishment.
Yeah, and to think, and I'm not defending it at all, but a 16-year-old boy ends up dying in prison for something he did as a kid.
Yeah.
He ended up joining gangs and all of that. I mean, he's not innocent. He became a gang member while in prison, and he may have been already. There's lots of stories that it was an initiation. But the stupidity of kids, and that's a harsh penalty. I mean, Peter Lane says they deserve it, and I don't disagree with him. But
you can understand Peter's
absolutely,
Peter's
and you'll appreciate this from an investigator's point of view. They shot him, took off. They only had that was a black car in a sea of black cars. They only caught them. They dropped James Edwards off at the police station for bail reporting.
Yeah,
he was seen dancing. He was going into the police station after being involved in the death of Chris Lane. They later picked him up, and they were caught because they were going to fight another kid, and they wanted to shoot him. The father had called the cops. The cops turned up. There's the black car. There's these 3 kids. Bang, gotcha. And it's the stupidity of kids.
Stupidity of the crimes. With getting access in the prisons like that in America, I know it's something that would be very difficult over here in this country.
Possible here. Yeah.
But there seems to be availability that there's no issue with prisoners being spoken to by the media.
In state prisons, in federal prisons, it's different. But in state prisons, most state prisons, you can get access to them if they agree to talk to you.
Yeah.
So there was a process to go through, and I think he got some counselling as well to make sure that he was fully understanding what he was doing. We had to be there at 8:00 in the morning, and my cameraman decided they were going to get a sunset over the prison shot, sun rising over the prison. So we were there at 6:00 in the morning. And all of a sudden, the sirens started blaring outside this prison, and 2 truckloads of prison guards with their guns hanging out and spotlights come racing towards us. They thought we were there as part of a breakout. So it was a pretty rocky start to our prison interview, and I thought it was going to be over before it even started. But that's tough time there. You're talking about Oklahoma. If they had been over the age of 18, they may have even gotten the death penalty.
Yeah. Well, that's the reality of it. We had a guest on here. His name was Evaristo Salas. He was, I think it was 15 or 16, an adult prison for a murder that he didn't commit. He was subsequently acquitted, but something like 25 years later.
Mm.
And he told us his journey. He was only a little kid. He was heading down the wrong track, but he certainly wasn't guilty of the crime that he was charged, and spent the greater part of his life in prison. And we interviewed him from his bedroom that he was in as a 15, 16-year-old kid 30 years later after he's been released from prison. And the way he came out was amazing, but the stories he was telling us about what happened in the prison was just quite frightening. And he had to make a choice to step away from the gangs and suffer the consequences when he got old enough in prison to be able to look after himself, or spend the rest of his life in prison. So it's a tough...
we covered a rodeo in a Louisiana prison, where basically once a year they allow prisoners to take part in a rodeo, even though that most of them are from urban areas, and it's kind of the enjoyment of the public come in and watch these poor buggers, get thrown off bulls and gored by bulls, but it's hardcore. The majority are in there for life.
Yeah,
that's it. They're never getting out. They're dying there, no matter what age they were there. I think we can agree to disagree, but we're too soft in this country, but on crime. But they are very hard on crime in America.
Yeah, I think we can find that middle ground, and we're starting to learn here about the way people are treated in prison can make a difference. Like, you treat people like animals, and they'll come out like animals, and
absolutely.
So we're making headway there. I think the Scandinavian countries have got a model that the recidivism is much lower, extremely low compared to what more traditional prisons provide, whether it be in the US or Australia. That way of rehabilitating people. So it's not, yes, they're taken away from the community, and the community are protected from them, but making them be able to function in society when they get out, which I think is a step in the right place. But let's talk Hurricane Katrina now. Again, the power of the forces of nature, but the floods that flowed from that, but the aftermath of that, what occurred, and the isolation, that community down in the New Orleans, and you hear stories, and I don't know where the fact or fiction lies about what took place in the football stadium where people were holed up, but you're actually there. Can you take us through that story?
Well, just to backtrack, I wasn't there when the hurricane hit. I was actually on a driving trip with my dad. We'd gone up.
That's right. I forgot you took your dad to. Look what I did.
Yeah,
Dad.
so we drove to Vancouver. We were driving back, and we were in Napa Valley. I'd been keeping an eye on the hurricane. It had been a really busy hurricane season. I'd covered several, so it wasn't out of the blue. But there was a lot of forecasts about how dangerous it was going to be. So I was keeping an eye on it in between drinking with Dad, and we had a crew there, and for some reason they were cleared to come home because the initial aftermath wasn't too bad. And then I got a call from my cameraman from the airport, and he said, "We're coming home, and the levees have just broken, and I think we're making a mistake." I'm like, "Oh God!" He said, "But we're about to board." Sure enough, hang up. The boss calls and said, we need you to go to New Orleans. I go, "Well, I've got Dad here.
Yeah.
And he's not comfortable driving back." And he goes, "Don't worry about it, mate. Just take him with you." I was like, "Dad, you want to go to New Orleans?" "Oh, yeah, all right." Poor Dad, yeah, of course. Yeah. Next minute, poor Dad's lands in New Orleans with me. Our first experience of New Orleans, we were at a kind of a freeway overpass, which normally be packed with cars. Instead, it was Black Hawk helicopters landing on the freeway, dropping people. They were plucking off rooftops that were flooded. We'd heard on the way that there were two Australian couples that were trapped at the convention centre. There were two kind of points where people were evacuated: the football stadium and the convention centre. They were trapped at the convention centre. The simple word from Sydney was, "Go find them." And so we're watching these Black Hawk helicopters landing, plucking people off, and they're like, yeah, we want you to go in there and find them. It's like, all right. So I go up to this copper on the side of the road, use my Australian accent, mate. "We need to go into New Orleans." And he said to me, "Son, I got every gun I own in this car, and I wouldn't go in there. They're killing people." And he goes, but if you need to go, just go down here, left, right, and then. So jump in the car with my cameraman, Trent, and off we go. And Dad goes, mate, he just said don't go in there. So sit in the back, mate. Shut up. He'll be right. We drive through, start driving through the streets of New Orleans. And, obviously trees are down and power lines are down. So it was, we had to go around and we were worried that we'd be confronted. And sure enough, this guy comes running down the street brandishing a gun. We're like, oh, God, here we go. It turned out he was an off-duty cop who owned a business, who had just fired shots at looters, who had broken his window. And,
oh, yeah, okay.
we drove up very, with a lot of trepidation. And then we kept going, and the cops were hanging out windows with their pump-action shotguns. And, they meant business.
Yep.
Poor Dad says, oh, look, there's some mannequins on the side of the road. They weren't. They were bloated bodies. And drive in, and cops are pulling guns off people, and there were people walking around, obviously, having just looted. We get to the convention centre, said to Dad, stay near the car. The cop was there, and he said, don't drive in. I'll take your car. Whatever you do, get out before nightfall. It's too dangerous. So we go in looking for the two Australian couples into the convention centre. And it was just like hell on earth. These poor people. We saw a number of bodies. People were dying from things like diabetes because they couldn't get their medication. People were asking us for help. They were just desperate. And we couldn't find these Australians. There were thousands of people there. Couldn't find these Australians. And it was starting to get dark. The warning was ringing in my ear for about cop telling us to get out. Just as we were leaving, I noticed there was an overpass, and there were a group of white people, because predominantly they were black. And I thought, oh, that's strange. We'll walk up there, and there were these foreign tourists that were kind of huddled together. And we found these two Australian couples who were just ecstatic to see us. But it was getting dark, and they were too frightened to leave. Yeah. So we left. It was dark. Poor Dad was frantic at the car.
Left him back at the car.
I was going to drive in there and save you. Oh, yeah, well, sure, mate. Yeah, whatever, dude. Anyway, so we camped in the street that night, and we were protected by NBC, who'd hired these off-duty cops from Texas. They had these big magazines on their guns, like, sitting there, and they're real tough guys. So Dad took some comfort in that, and in the middle of the night, we're sleeping in the car, and a paint factory across the Mississippi blew up, and it felt like the space shuttle was taking off against us, near us. And so Dad's had this horror day. He's gone from Napa Valley to New Orleans, to sleeping in a car with us, to this explosion rocking the car. And poor old Dad, forgive my language, he goes, what the fuck is going on now? So anyway, this black plume of smoke starts rising up. The cops, the big brave cops, they took off. They didn't worry about protecting anybody. They protected them. So Dad came back and said, "They're gone, mate. We're gone. We've got to get out of here." I said, "Calm down, mate. Calm down. We'll be right. We have to go back and get the Australians in the morning. I can't leave them there." So things calmed down. We went and got the Australians. We got them out under a convoy. It was like driving out of Baghdad. These poor Australians. We actually found another couple huddled nearby, and we went and grabbed them. And these plainclothes cops came and grabbed us, started jumper punching us. So what's going on? We're going to arrest you for what? And they were angry because we were plucking two tourists out, and they were worried that the rest of them would be cranky with them.
Ah, right.
So Anyway, we got the tourists out. We put them all on a plane and put poor old Dad on the plane and back to Australia, muttering, "These Americans are mad, mate. They're just mad."
Has your dad been on holidays with you since, or is that?
Yeah, he has. He has. He dines out on it now. I tell you, but he was quite shocked. But we spent another couple of weeks there, and I make light. It was a horrible story that stuck with me because predominantly the people that had been abandoned there were African American, and there was a bridge like the Anzac Bridge or the Balti Bridge leading out of New Orleans where people could have walked across, but in many cases they were met by police from other jurisdictions who'd fire shots over their heads
Stay
because
in
they were
there.
black. They didn't want the problem in their neighbourhood, so they were left
That's a
for days.
that's the horror of it, isn't it? Like the natural disaster, and that was the levee breaks, and I think my understanding of it is the actual town in itself was below the sea level.
Yes.
So once the levees have broken,
like a bowl.
it just pours in.
But
But
sorry, they were there for 5 days. People were dying, and yet we were able to drive out and file our story and see people in restaurants having cocktails and steak.
and how far are we talking? Like we drive out.
20 minutes, 30 minutes. And it only when the political pressure became too much for George W. Bush, they decided to send the National Guard in, and they cleared them out within hours. But there was this lot of folklore about people being murdered and raped in the. I never found any evidence of that. And in fact, I think it was based on racism. The reports that they shots were being fired at the rescue helicopters. Well, it turns out they weren't. They were people so desperate to be rescued were firing shots to
we're down here.
grab attention.
Yeah.
Yes, there was looting. There's no question about that. But mind you, cops were taking cars from dealerships to get the hell out of there. That's how desperate things were. It really showed a bad side of America. They'd forgotten those people just based purely on the colour of their skin.
Do you think it was race-based, the colour of their
no
skin?
question. It would never have happened in Boston.
Yeah.
A white city like Boston.
It's you can see why the anger and the divide in the country when that type of thing happens, that people could be forgotten. And that's why I found the story, just following it over the years, was quite amazing. Like, how did this happen? This is America. They can fight wars anywhere around the globe, but they can't look after their own people in a situation like that.
We went back a decade later to the Ninth Ward, the lower Ninth Ward. That's where the levee broke. It broke in several places, but that was the worst of it. And it was an African American working class community. Basically, just wiped the homes off their foundations and the people in them. And a decade later, pretty much abandoned. People moved to other communities. They couldn't afford to rebuild. They get fines for not cutting the lawn on their abandoned lot, to the point where the fines would mount and they'd have the land seized and then they'd be sold to white people. And so it was kind of like, you could see why they were so angry, why black Americans
Is there
angry.
still a lot of divide and anger? Your observations of it. I know you've got a personal interest in it too. That
my son's African American. Undoubtedly, there is systemic racism. I thought perhaps out of Barack Obama it would change. I think it probably has gone. It's certainly under Trump, it's gone backwards, no doubt about it.
Well, it's get these extreme views, isn't it? Like it polarises people and divides people. It's a shame, but that's an interesting story, and I'll have to get your dad on here, and he can tell me the story how he saved these Australians.
Oh yeah, he dines out on it now.
There was a big explosion. My son Mike, he was scared. I said, "Don't worry, your dad's here." We'll get the true story. Another one that and this is again the impact of nature, but the aftermath is the Haiti earthquake. Talk us through that, because I know that left an impression on you, and the circumstances surrounding it and what happened when you were there.
And I think a lot of people have forgotten that story too.
Again, it's just we can't relate to it because they're not. We don't understand their world.
We remember the Boxing Day tsunami, and maybe as many people died in the Haiti earthquake, but it's such a remote, often forgotten part of the world. It was +7 magnitude earthquake hit Port-au-Prince, and this is an impoverished country, said to be one of the most dangerous countries in the Western Hemisphere, certainly is now. We got this call that this terrible earthquake had struck, and to be honest, I wasn't quite sure. I knew it was in the Caribbean somewhere. Wasn't quite sure where. We tried to get there. The airport, again, trying to get to these places is often the biggest challenge. We flew into the Dominican Republic and drove in across the border at night, despite being told not to, and got into Port-au-Prince, and thousands of people were asleep in the city centre in makeshift camps because all their homes had been destroyed. Early reports were 300,000 people had died in Port-au-Prince. It may be less than that, but it was significant. Anderson Cooper from CNN had booked out an entire hotel. We arrived late at night and told a fib to the hotel staff that we were part of Anderson Cooper's CNN crew. So we stayed, because it was a massive hotel. We stayed in this hotel for 3 or 4 days, pretending that we're CNN's crew, hoping we weren't going to get caught. We eventually fessed up to CNN. They thought it was funny, thankfully. But Port-au-Prince had been absolutely destroyed, from the Parliament, homes. We went to interview an Australian aid worker who's working in the suburbs of Port-au-Prince, and when we were there, someone tugged on the arm of my cameraman and said, "We can hear a baby screaming from the ruins." And the Australian aid worker said, "Don't go down there, because if you get a tremor, everything's going to go and you'll go with it." But we're like,
what do you do?
So we went, and there was a side of a hill, all these kind of pieces of concrete, which obviously been a home. We walked down the side of the hill. Sure enough, out of this kind of hole, you could hear this baby screaming, crying, faintly, but you could hear her crying. The security guard that we were with was a little fella. He started very bravely digging deeper into the hole, kind of going around the big pieces of concrete, and over several hours kept saying, like, "I think I'm getting closer. I'm getting closer. There's a body there. Hang on. I think I see her. Next minute, out comes this little girl. Had been there, I think, 4 days. Pulled this little girl. Her eyes are, trying to adjust to the light. She was covered in dust, and hands her to me. And I'm like, whose baby is this? This guy emerges out of the crowd and says she's mine. And I'm like, well, what's her name? What's your name? He couldn't remember her name. Turns out he was the uncle who'd been walking past every day since the family home had disappeared in the earthquake, in the hope that his family would come out of there. They were all dead, including his parents. And there was Winnie. Her name was Winnie. She was 16 months old. She was alive. It was quite remarkable. I copped a bit of flack, Gary, over that story, because people, some people claim we put the baby in there. Some people said, well, why did you film it? I stand by what we did, because harkening back to what we spoke about in the last episode, people had started to move on from Haiti. It was 3 or 4 days later. There was shock. They'd started to move on. That image of me holding Winnie, how can a journo be pulling a baby out of the rubble in this earthquake zone? All of a sudden, there was an influx of international rescue crews who should have been doing this stuff, and hopefully more people were saved as a result of that. I mean, I'm not a rescuer, and I in fairness, the security guard, he was the guy that was brave. I was just on the side of the hill.
But again, and taking it back to where we started in part one, the importance of covering that. And if you don't cover that type of thing, you're not going to get the responses needed, because it's easy to forget about.
Well, that's it. The whole world would have just moved on, And then the following day, we went to an orphanage where half of the children had been killed. The other half were just laying on the street, some of them seemingly with horrific injuries, in absolute pain. but there was no medical help available to them, so we had to leave them there. It looked like they had broken legs and arms. Talking toddlers, 3-year-olds who were about to be adopted by American families. Horrific stuff. But if we don't bring that, if we don't show that, the world doesn't see it, they turn a blind eye to it. It's only Haiti. We'll move on.
Yeah. How it must be hard for you. In that situation, like I won't say survivor guilt, you weren't there at the start, but there is, I speak to people that have survived tragedies where other people have been killed or walking away from stuff. You must, in your quiet moments, have to process what you see when you see destruction on the scale that you've seen.
Yeah, that one hit me really hard because my son's African American, he's adopted.
Yeah.
We were at an orphanage. They were of similar age, so it was, I couldn't help but put my boy there. Totally different circumstances.
Yeah.
For him, clearly, but I couldn't help but see his face, even in Winnie. So that really hit me hard. And walking away from those children, and we tried to call people. People were being turned away from hospitals. I was really traumatized by that. Plus, I was copping flack in the media at home, about our coverage. So that was the only time when someone said to me, "Do you need any help?" I'd said yes. Maybe I should speak to someone.
Yeah.
And they gave me a 1-800 number, and I thought,
yeah,
okay, I'll deal with it myself.
HR must have come into play at that stage because that's we've ticked the box, we've offered help.
They're much. In fairness to them, they're really, really good now.
I saw that in the cops, like a shooting incident or whatever. Has anyone got a problem with that? As you're sitting in a room with 20 cops sitting around, they're all staring at each other, trying to be tough guys or girls, and no, we're fine. And we've offered them counselling, but
I mean, and that's what we did. It's what you. I mean, I don't compare what I went through to what you've been through because,
each is different in the different ways, but. I think, and I get, and this I like journalists, and I think that's why cops and journalists get along well. They can understand the humour. Like we're talking something horrendous, but you could be in fear of your life, but you can still sit there and have a laugh about something, and that's a survival mechanism.
It absolutely is, and that black humour, dark humour. If you heard that from the outside, you'd think these guys are heartless. But that was the way we dealt with it. And often over a beer, you wouldn't talk about, you don't say to your cameraman, it was predominantly me and a cameraman, are you okay, mate? That's not the way we spoke, we just, as you say, oh no, we're tough guys, But we'd push stuff down, and in writing this book, I had to kind of revisit it. And that kind of brought it back to the surface. And it's like, Mike, you're probably not okay with what you saw. It probably hit you more than you realise, and that stuff just chips away at your soul. And I think I'd had enough of it. I'd seen enough. I'd had enough. And again, I don't want sympathy, but because I chose to be that. That's the lifestyle I chose. I chose to put myself there. The people I were covering never chose to be there. But we were bouncing. I'd go from Haiti earthquake to Oscars red carpet to interviewing George Clooney to covering politics to going to the Olympics. It's like at breakneck speed. You didn't have a chance to sit there and feel sorry for yourself.
That is a bit of a mind fuck for you, like going from this to that to this. Who the hell am I? Yeah.
But not even that, Gary. Not even that. Go from these poor little orphans in Haiti. Dead and seemingly really bad shape, to all of a sudden back bouncing on the trampoline with my same age son, and back to dad duty. And my wife had spent a lot of her time. She's so patient with me, and a lot of her time by herself. And I miss so much of my son's growing up that it was you don't have time. You just got to get back into being a parent, and that. It is a mindfuck. And you just try to move on because you don't want to waste the limited time you have with your family, talking about what you just saw. They
Yeah,
don't need to.
I picked that theme up in your book, and it sort of made me reflect. And that's right. When I was away from my family for extended times on different jobs, you knew you had limited time, and you had to make
Yeah.
the most of it when you were back there, or try to make the most of it. And you can't, you try not to carry what you've seen or done into that environment.
And that was kind of the therapy for me too. I think is like I had two lives,
Yep.
and I kind of jumped out of that life where I saw some terrible stuff into the simple life of being on a trampoline, going to soccer practice, dropping him off at school.
Yeah.
And I missed so much that I didn't want to waste that time.
Yeah, no, I understand, and it resonated with me, and I think a lot of people that have done different things in their life could relate to what we're talking about here. David Hicks' story.
Mm.
Again, this is all stems from what happened in the towers in New York. But tell us a bit about that, because you went to where he was being detained, and I just find
Guantanamo Bay.
I just find it fascinating, the stories that have come out of that, horrifying, fascinating, and everything else in between. Tell us your experience there.
So just a reminder, David Hicks from Adelaide, he got swept up in the aftermath of September 11 when the Americans went into Afghanistan. He was actually picked up by the Northern Alliance and handed over to the CIA. He was fighting for the Taliban. He later admitted he'd met Osama bin Laden. He was a thrill seeker. That's not to say that he didn't. That kind of underplays what he's.
Yeah.
He'd gone in search of adventure, I think, and found himself tangled up in something I don't think he fully understood. Picked up by the CIA, taken to black sites, ended up going to Guantanamo Bay, where they were taking all these enemy combatants, as they called them, to this small naval base part of Cuba. Americans deliberately dropped them off there because they were not part of the American justice system, so they could take them there. That they were tortured, and so we were among the first media crew to go to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, this military base. So we were landed with the military, and the initial prison was like a dog pound. It was like it had wire fences, narrow wire fences with a rudimentary rooftop, open to the to all the weather conditions down there, and they were in orange jumpsuits. Deplorable conditions, but obviously they weren't getting any sympathy from the Americans because they were part, they thought, of the responsibility for the attack on the World Trade Center, which had only just happened. So we followed David Hicks through this military tribunal system. So he was down there for many years. So we went there 3 times in total. He did plead guilty, and they sent him back. He actually went into a jail in Adelaide and served some time from memory. But at a later stage, the charge was overturned.
His conviction was overturned because the law under which he was charged had not been passed at the time the actions he was arrested were committed. Yeah. Was it confronting seeing that? I know when the images first started coming out, there was outrage at how could people be treated like this. Balance it out with the understanding America was at war. Things needed to be done. What was your personal impression of it?
I couldn't believe that you would keep humans like that.
Yeah.
No matter what they're accused of, and no doubt there were some evil people there, no doubt at all. But there were also some people that were swept up, who were at best bit players. The mastermind of the September 11 attacks eventually was housed down there, but really most of them were later released back to their home countries.
Yeah.
They eventually built a proper prison down there, which is still there today. But to see that rudimentary prison, I couldn't believe how they were keeping people. But again, there was no sympathy or outrage from Americans because they were still deeply mourning what had happened.
Right.
So, the government was using that.
Well, again, just an experience seeing something like that, and I think you also managed to find some fun on the island. Is that in the book where you
Yeah.
Aussies managed to find a bar even in a
Yeah.
place like that?
I was with a bloke called Carl Stefanovic. You
Oh,
might have heard from
I've
him.
heard of that bloke. He's got a
Yeah.
reputation.
He,
He'll get
he,
you into trouble hanging out with him.
He'll find trouble even in Guantanamo Bay. So the base, the naval base, is split in two by the bay itself. So they kept the journos, the troublemakers, on one side of the bay, where there was not much, but local workers and journos were constantly chaperoned, and the prison and the rest of the population was on the other side of the bay. But there was one bar. And we went there one night, and there were these Filipino workers who were, they were helping maintain the base, and they were deciding they were going to have a beach party. And of course, our ears pricked up. You beauty, beach party! So we went down to the Caribbean, and I'm scared of sharks, so I didn't go in, but the other fools did. And there was a pier, and I was walking on the pier, giving them a mouthful of lip. And I still had my sunglasses on. I think I had too many beers. And I didn't see the end of the pier, and it was like a 6-foot drop to the sand. So I was giving the mouthful of lip, and as I did that, I walked off the end of the pier and face planted straight into the sand, to their cheering, got up, the glasses all bent out of shape, had my sand on my face, and you bloody idiot, Amor. Well, I woke up the next morning, had 2 black eyes. We were with American reporters who were much more serious in that kind of regard. And they're like, how did you end up getting a black eye? So we found fun where we could. I mean, we took our jobs seriously.
Well, that'll teach you to try to look cool with your dark sunglasses on.
On the wall. Teach me for drinking too much.
Again, you do that, and you look back, and you got to take some joy in all the things that you've done. There's so many other areas that you've been to. I'm fascinated by the favelas in Brazil, and you've spent some time over there. The tunnels in Mexico. Just give us a couple of anecdotes of those locations.
Well, I fell in love with Mexico for a start. I love the community, but I also love the juxtaposition of America's wealth just across the border. There's this community, it's held ransom by the cartels.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to do a story on the drug tunnels. I've done a lot of stories on the border area, which is fascinating for Australians who don't have a hard border. And I got a call from our Mexican fixer who said they've just found a drug tunnel. Can you get down here? We happen to be in San Diego, just across the border. And so we were able to get there within an hour. And so we ended up on the back of this army truck taking us to this drug tunnel that had just been found. It was run from a kind of a wreckage yard in the Mexico side. And we climbed down. It's like a maybe 15-meter drop using rope, climbing down, and then crawled through this tunnel. And in one part, there was rock on top of the tunnel, and they couldn't get under. Obviously, couldn't get through the rock, so they went under, and it was maybe 50 centimeters high. So you'd have to go on your stomach. Well, it was a bad time to find out that I'm actually claustrophobic.
That's when you discovered it.
Oh, my heart started beating out of my chest. The tunnel widened, so you could virtually walk in it, but I was done. I had to get out of there. I thought I was going to die. I left my cameraman and the poor old Mexican fixer. But I love those kind of adventures because I think that's what foreign correspondents should do, is take people to places that they're fascinated by but not necessarily would like to go to, like the favelas, which had been, they've been pacified by the Brazilian police in the lead up to the World Cup. So basically, the favelas are on hillsides. So the drug cartels, the drug gangs would have their headquarters on the top of the hill because the police would have to fight their way up to them. And they had all-out war to try and pacify these favelas, these slums. And they were kind of successful, although we went in there at night and still spoke to the drug gangs who basically just blended into the community and waited them out.
Fascinating, but it's like a war zone. I've heard of stories from policing point of view and also from the gangs point of view over there. And it's incredible. Mm-hmm. All the things you've seen and done, you would have been in some pretty dangerous situations. Any time you feared for your life, or how did I get through that?
Yeah, I think during the overthrow of Libya, we were in a firefight in the Sahara Desert during a sandstorm, and we knew there was fighting. We could hear it, but we couldn't see it. And we were part of a pack of media and I guess they were local fighters, people, they were butchers and builders who suddenly turned into soldiers. And we're going towards the front line, and we're going over these little hills in this dust storm, and all of a sudden the word would get back that Gaddafi's forces are just over the next rise, so there'd be a mad panic going back the other way in the middle of this dust storm. And this kept happening, and we'd go back and we'd go forward, and there were people panicking. We went back the next day, and we saw the aftermath of the fighting. We realised how close we had come to being caught, and what I heard the other security guards say, the kill zone, that you could wander into the kill zone in this sandstorm and not know that you were there until you were there, and then you were too late.
Then it's too late.
So I think we were pretty lucky there. And at the same time, we went into a village that had been liberated from Gaddafi. They were all happy. That was a village that had been was bombed by Gaddafi forces while we were there. The next day, crews went back, and we were going to go back, and they had a change of heart overnight, and suddenly found themselves back on the Gaddafi side and opened fire on the crews that were driving into the village, thinking they were safe. So they're the kind of dangers that you face in those circumstances.
If your name's on the bullet, your name's on the bullet in those situations.
And we caught a taxi, by the way. That's how we got there. So we were with a driver who didn't speak any English. So we were basically doing the thumbs up. Thumbs up, good. Thumbs down, we're getting out of there. So that was the rudimentary way we were communicating to this guy in the middle of this sandstorm, in the middle of this battle. He probably thought this was the hardest fare he's ever had in his lifetime.
The glamour lifestyle of a foreign correspondent.
Yeah, right.
So you're traveling the world, reporting on these jobs, the highs, the lows, and different things, and you get back here, and then you're in Melbourne based, and we have COVID pandemic and the lockdown. Thoughts? We touched on it very briefly about before we started recording about the lockdowns and lack of accountability.
Well, Gary, it was one of those stories. When I was a foreign correspondent, I'd go and do stories, but I'd come back to normality.
Yeah.
Whereas COVID lockdowns, we were living and breathing it. We were lucky enough to be able to continue to work, but this was a story that we couldn't escape. It was hard on my family because they'd had just moved from America. It was very hard on my son. I saw it firsthand. He'd only just started high school, basically spent 2 years out of school. My wife's father had cancer, and we didn't know whether he was going to survive. So typical of so many stories in Melbourne during lockdown. It was a really confronting time to be a journo, and I wonder, and I've put a lot of thought into this, did we do enough as a profession to hold the powers that be accountable for the steps that they were taking, because they went too far.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. History already tells us they went too far, locking kids out of schools, out of playgrounds, curfews, police interviewing grandmothers on park benches to find out where they lived and should they be
5 kilometre
together.
road, yeah.
And, even the protests, even the crazy COVID deniers and, the police cracking down on the protests and using rubber bullets and they just went too far. And I think the police force down here certainly would admit now that they regret being the ones to enforce
Yeah.
a lot of that. And I think that we didn't question hard enough. The Daily Dan, the press conferences that were held every day, we were trying
Yeah.
to question them. But I think perhaps it was a great example of a community just falling in line with something that just went too far.
Mike, I'd also say that the Daily Dan, I'd call it the headmistress was speaking to us at 11 o'clock, waiting for, and we allowed out in the playground today with our premier. To me, I agree with I had just left the police, so I could see it from the police point of view. I don't think the police would have been enjoying enforcing the rules.
No, they weren't. No.
But then I see it from the journalistic point of view, and I was working, in the media now, and I was hearing the talk on the floor about people thinking this is ridiculous, but no one was really brave enough to put it in writing or report. But then you had the lockdowns, the curfews. Half of it didn't make sense. Like the initial lockdown, I understood. They're saying we've got to prepare for it. That made sense. Then I just saw people that had power were enjoying the power, and I reference your mate down there, Dan. He just seemed to lap it up, the locking the state down and the power. The Queensland Premier, when there was a state of origin game, this is my gift to the people. Like, but are you the emperor? Like, what do you mean this is your gift to the people opening the state? Shouldn't it? The state should have never been locked down.
Well, I think one of the driving forces here, and I don't want to get too political, but one of the driving forces here was they were concerned that the health system would collapse.
Yes.
And I think initially you're right, that the initial lockdowns made sense because we didn't know what we were facing, and we saw what was happening in Italy and New York, and that was horrendous. We didn't want that here. But they were concerned that the health system wasn't sturdy enough to stand up to.
Yep.
And I think what became health decisions became political decisions, that they were saving their political backsides in the end, and destroyed. I mean, even my son, I still see it in him. He was a great sportsman and stopped sport, quit school. And we're seeing a whole generation, and I wonder whether the crime that we're seeing down here is partly among kids, partly to blame, because all of a sudden you lock kids in their room, all they're doing is following, social media trends, getting out of healthy habits, is what we're seeing in part due to those lockdowns. And we should have pushed back harder. We tried, but we were also we were kind of caught. We kind of the I stand with Dan crew and the dictator Dan crew. The dictator Dan crew, you aren't going hard enough. I stand with Dan crew, saying you're putting public health and at risk here. So we were getting caught, and I said.
I share your views on it, and I wonder the damage that has been done for people like your son at the age he was, but also the infants, the ones that for the first 2-3 years in those formative years weren't allowed to socialise or play with other kids, or everyone walking around in a mask, like reading facial expressions, like these are terrible things.
It was a terrible time, and for a while I regretted coming back. I really did, because it's not what I can't. Everywhere was suffering, no question about it, but certainly Victoria suffered.
I was surprised, and then like the curfews, I'm trying to work out if someone could explain to me the logic between the 9 p.m. lockdown. Like if I want to go for a walk at 9 p.m. or I was living on my own at the time, and I'd go out and I'd be stopped by police am I outside the 5 kilometre radius of where do you live? It was crazy, but I'm glad we're talking about it now. Maybe something more should have been done at the time, but if we learnt lessons from it, I don't think we'll be as compliant if this type of thing comes in. Now, that might be problematic depending on what situation we're dealing with, but I think they overstepped the mark. But I picked up on that in your book, and it's something that I've been troubled with about the way that we responded. And I think we are still paying for a lot of the problems we're seeing in society now from what happened there, taking everyone out of circulation. Personally, you look back at your career, any regrets?
Oh, no, not really. No, I feel very fortunate for all the opportunities that have been afforded me. I mean, I almost failed Year 12 English. I went to a tech college. A boy from Bendigo, I probably shouldn't have seen what I've seen and been afforded the opportunities and the experiences. So I feel very fortunate. Yes, I've made some missteps along the way. We all do, don't we? But I've been nothing but lucky, and journalism has been wonderful to me, and I love the industry. Yes, it's changing, but I still fundamentally believe in those lessons taught to me by the cranky old journos in the Bendigo Advertiser, that what we do is important, is crucial in any healthy democracy, and how we do it, upholding the core beliefs that we should uphold, that chasing the truth is what our fundamental job. I fundamentally believe, despite all the changes in the industry, we're even more important now with social media. I still think we play a very important role.
It is an important role. I agree with you. Would you recommend the career that you've had for let's say your son or someone else that was interested in pursuing that path?
I'd rather him be a doctor or a lawyer.
Very good lawyer, charge a lot of money. Well, we could take the conversation, but we'd be lost in that. I've been going down the rabbit warren of AI. What is going to be the profession? Like a lawyer, like just what's available now. We had he's a dean at a law faculty, former magistrate, and talking about law. And I was saying, with what we've got with AI, like the solicitors, part of it was researching case law, the statutes and different things. Now with AI, it's click of a button. And he made the point that he thinks law schools or law, getting your law degree should be more sort of based on time in the courts, and only do theory for a day. So 4 days in the courts, that practical experience, and then theory, because we don't need 3 years of theory now because it's readily available. And it made me think about how much the world is going to change with AI developments.
Yeah, I wonder what journalism's going to be like. I mean, obviously, when I first started, it wasn't the internet. So if you wanted to find an old story, a file story, you'd have to thumb your way through old musty old editions of the Bendigo Addy, even phones, and the world is changing, and in some ways it's making our job as journalists easier, in some ways it's making it harder, and maybe maybe I'm a newsreader now, maybe there'll be AI newsreaders and they'll probably be much better than I, but hopefully not until I'm gone.
I'm worried about my gig here. Surely they can create something smarter than me, and without any mistakes or stutters. But no, look, it's been great having a chat with you. Thanks for taking the time, and I thoroughly recommend the book. And where do you get the book? At any good bookstore, News Cowboys. But it's been great having a chat, and a lot of fun, and a lot of interest.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you doing it, and thank you for picking it up at the Adelaide airport. I appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thanks, Gary.